Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Orbit Live event. I'm so excited to welcome two fantastic fantasy authors, Josiah Bancroft and Uris Ford. Josiah Bancroft is the author of the Books of Babel series, which began with Senlin Ascends. The Fall of Babel, the epic conclusion of the series, just released yesterday and is available now. Uris Ford is the author of several fantasy series. His newest series, The Age of Uprising, begins with the upcoming Engines of Empire, which will be releasing on January 18th. During the event, Josiah and Richard will be answering your questions. You can submit any questions you have by clicking the Ask a Question link below the video. You can also vote on your fellow attendees' questions so that the questions with the most votes are likely answered first. This event is being recorded, and you'll be able to access the replay using the same Crowdcast link you used to enter the event. And now, without further ado, I'll turn the event over to Josiah and Richard.
Hello.
Hello.
So, look, first questions first. Do you prefer Richard or Rich or R-Man?
Rich.
Like, what's your
Rich is fine.
Okay.
Rich is the usual one. And I think as we've started, I should do a full disclosure that, as you know, we had a power cut here about an hour ago, and the power's only just come back on. So if I disappear at any moment, Josiah's already promised to handle things. I think you mentioned you were going to do a skiffle set or something.
I have a puppet show all ready to go if it's Punch and Judy sort of thing if necessary.
Awesome.
So, but hopefully, don't go dark. Like, stay with us.
I'll try to do my best.
So no, we were just like chatting before we got on camera about the sort of anxiety about book release. All the years of preparation, writing, creation, thought, separation from family and loved ones to do this thing, and then it, is released to the world. And there's a lot of anxiety, I think, for some of us. Not all of us. Some of us, really enjoy it, but for some of us, like perhaps me and you, there's some anxiety connected to that. So I was curious, like, how are you feeling? About the upcoming release? How's it going?
Nervous, because this is, I mean, obviously. When you start something new, obviously you started your series 10 years ago.
Yes.
So you and it's become very popular. You built a following. So I imagine you've been all right with the latest release, and it's received.
Oh, there's always an opportunity to panic. I mean, I think there's always a chance just to really fret and have the night sweats, and I don't want to miss those. Like, those are the cherished moments that I want to remember at the end of my life. But no, of course, it's been a lot of fun. It's been great. The release yesterday went really well. I do like how I asked you a question, you immediately just sort of put on a lazy Susan, brought right around.
I should have warned you. I do that. I tend to waffle and then turn things around. To answer your question, I'm really nervous. This is the third fantasy trilogy I'll have had out, and it's very different to the stuff I've written before. So, and it's a new publisher. Orbit's, I'm sort of an Orbit newbie, rookie. So, and I'm loving the way that they've been handling things. It's received. Oh, I flickered then. I've received. What would you? I've seen a couple of. It's out on NetGalley, and some arcs have been sent out, so it's getting good, very early sort of responses. So, but fingers crossed. I mean, you're always going to be sort of nervous and anxious before it hits the shelves, and then people start liking it, or not.
Or ignoring it, and you just go back to the closet. It's that's very similar to what like I'm experiencing. Of course, like Orbit's been fantastic. They're, I think, a wonderful publisher, a wonderful purveyor of books. I mean, they've been great for every step of the process. I don't know, like, did you have a different experience with kind of the editorial process this time around?
This time has certainly been the most rigorous. I've never done so many drafts before. This is like 6 or 7, and this is after you've already done a couple of drafts yourself. So I don't know whether that's testament to how bad the first draft was, or just how good Orbit are. Just their determination to make sure it's great when it hits the shelves. But yes, it's certainly the most. It's taken the longest to produce post first draft, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I wanted to ask you was, you finished series now, the fourth book in the quadrilogy. Is that what they call it?
Tetralogy sounds a little too snooty, so we go with quadrilogy, but also go for a 4Z. A 4Z is fine.
Or a 4Z. Oh, I like that one. Yeah, 4Z. Well, you finish your 4Z. How does it feel? How does it? Are you relieved? Are you sad? How's it hitting you?
I like to have wild mood swings, so it just depends on what moment of the day you ask me.
That's just a normal writer thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. That's why I tap into. So no, it's been all those things. It's been joyous, sad, concerning, because then you're like, what if my best ideas are behind me, and now I have to, do that like sad descent into irrelevance that some bands that you love do. Or by the fourth album, you're like, oh boy, you really had 2 albums in you. That was it. So it's always a little nervous, a little. I do feel some anxiety about that, but I feel anxiety about like if I'm going to burn the toast in the morning. That's sort of my resting state. So it's nothing new. I just kind of roll with it. But generally, I feel very relieved. I feel somewhat accomplished. I'm glad it's over. You've finished more series than I have. Like when you finished your first series, was it like there's my magnum opus, or was it like okay, now something else? Like how did you feel about it?
Well, I'm finishing my first series was kind of bittersweet because it was. I wanted more out of it, but the long story long, it was picked up by Headline, who had never published fantasy before, so they were riding on the back of the popularity of the Game of Thrones TV show. So they started a fantasy imprint and ran it for a couple of years before deciding that it wasn't working for them. So I had the 3-book contract. They honored the 3-book contract, but they weren't interested in any books beyond that. So I ended that trilogy with a lot of loose threads, just because I didn't know how to finish it. Basically, the main arc of the 3 books it's based around a siege. So book 1's leading up to the siege, book 2 the enemy's here, book 3 the siege, and so that's beginning, middle, and end of that series. But the character arcs sort of could have carried on, but I never got an opportunity to do that. So that was always kind of bittersweet. So when I did the second trilogy for Titan Books a few years later, which the last one came out last year, I made sure that it was all not wrapped up in a bow, but it came to a natural conclusion. And it had a beginning, middle, and end for all the characters in that.
Yeah. Well, and that like experience you were able to pull into the next trilogy is really impressive. Because I mean, after finishing the series that I have, my gut instinct is to never write another series again. Like it's exhausting. It's so.
Yes, it is.
You live with these characters. You have to really dwell upon their inner lives in a way that is rewarding but also exhausting. It can sometimes feel like a protracted mistake. Like there were points when I was writing the series, I was like, boy, if this is a boo-boo, I've really doubled down on it. Like this is a big.
But sometimes you got to, especially if you've signed a contract for 3 books, 4 books, whatever, you've got to do them. You've committed, and you don't want to disappoint those fans like some certain authors have, but who we won't mention.
I can't think of a one.
Someone mentioned someone once, I think. Anyway, we won't go there. But you started the first book a long time ago. Was it nearly 10 years ago? And you independently published.
2011 was when I first started drafting the ideas, and similar to you, I'm sure your experience is like sometimes there's many different drafts you go through. You're talking about like with this current book that you had to kind of like comb through it a few times before you were happy with it, and then with the editors again. Similar Sense began as a prose poem, which was awful, and then it advanced to something slightly worse, and then I over a couple of months tightened the focus to what it is now, which is kind of a sort of adventure story. But yeah, I mean it. About 10 years ago, I sat down and started working on this thing, and I have to get faster. Like, I mean, it's when I meet people like you who are on their 3rd with a 4th on the way. I mean, that's just so impressive. So my goal is to never write a series again, but if I do, I'll write 3 at the same time, just going get that going.
So, have you got plans for what you're doing next?
I do. I'm working on a new property called The Hexologist, which is a little bit more fantasy by the numbers in the sense that there's actual magic and dragons and recognizable fantasy tropes. It centers around a sleuthing couple, a married couple who are detectives who solve paranormal crimes, set kind of a familiar 1920s-esque Art Nouveau, Art Deco sort of era. So it's about 3/4 through the first draft right now. Seems to be going pretty well. I'm enjoying it. It's nice to be kind of out of the Tower of Babel for a bit. I had to.
Do you not find yourself missing? Do you not find yourself missing when you've moved on to something new? Do you not find yourself missing being in that? Because obviously 10 years is a long time. And those characters were in your head for a long time. Do you not find yourself sort of missing them? Do you feel like you're cheating on your old series?
I do miss it, but it's mostly because I'm lazy. And the great thing about writing a series is you can go back and be like, oh, I've already established this lore. I've already established this nomenclature, this idiom for this thing. I don't have to invent all this stuff every day. But I'll wake up and I'll start writing. I'm like, oh, so we need to come up with an analog for what you would call a telegraph, or I have to sit there for half an hour being like, milligram.
We've all been there. Well, that's the thing as well. I'm on my third fantasy series, so I find it difficult and sometimes frustrating to come up with new stuff in a new fantasy world for the third time. How are you
before you go on, I would say I was very impressed by the opening of your book, which had the dramatic persona, like the list of all the characters. I read through all that. I was like, my God, this is complex and involved, and I really liked the names. I thought you're good at this. So whatever magic you've bottled there, keep sipping from it, because that's great. It's wonderful.
I'd like to say that it's all planned, but some of them are just accidents. Some of them, although I've not I don't think I've resorted to the random character generator things that.
Okay. Can you DM me that site later? Don't say this now, but I might.
I actually used one that was recommended to me by Gareth Hanrahan, who I used to work with actually back in the day. He uses one called the Onomasticon, Cape Monk's Onomasticon, and it's got lots of real world names from different cultures all over the world. So I would tend to look at that quite a bit and then sort of bastardize the spellings of the names.
Yeah.
Because for me, when I first started, it was just like, oh, this sounds like a fantasy name, I'll use that. But as you develop and you're creating different cultures in your own world building, I find it helps sort of place the characters if they've all got sort of similar sound. So some sound sort of Germanic, some sound sort of ancient Egyptian, and that kind of thing. So I've found that sort of helps sit everything in its culture.
That makes sense. That sounds like a reasonable way to go about it. Much better than just what I like to do, which is just you mash the keyboard and see what comes out.
Yeah. Can I say that phonetically? I don't think I can.
Yeah, that's a lot of asterisks. I don't know. That's great. I think that sometimes sometimes readers will say to me the grand design was apparent from the beginning. This is obviously an act of genius. I'm like, boy, this is groping around in the dark with a desperation.
Absolutely.
Looking for a light.
People knew how much we did by accident. They'd be like, what? Even I could do this.
That's right. You phony.
Fair, if people met me in real life, they'd be like, he does what? Looks of surprise on people's faces when you tell them what you do. And then the next question is, have you ever had anything published?
Oh boy, for years, that was exactly how I killed a conversation. Although now that I am actually I've been published, no one asks anymore. I think the cure for social curiosity is it's just even middling success, because then they're like, I don't want to talk about that with him. So I walk around ask me about my books, and no one ever does. So
Do you enjoy that conversation, or do you get embarrassed?
Oh no, I don't enjoy it. But I don't enjoy conversations. I think that they're difficult and I need a second draft. Generally, like I'm happy.
We were talking about this before, just for the audience member. We were talking about this before we started.
It's funny. I think that I always dreamed that there would be this sort of mystique around being a writer. We would say to somebody in a social gathering, like, "Oh, I write books," and there would be a follow up. But anytime it's kind of like, "Oh, I write books," and I'm like, "Oh, do
so
you?"
what's actually on that point? What's the biggest writing myth that you thought was true about being a novelist before you started that's been sort of dispelled since?
Oh, that's a good question. I did think that I would automatically grow a winning beard, and I've tried several times, and it just looks like I've eaten shoelaces. It's just terrible. If it were my life's work to grow a beard, it would be over. I can't do it. So yeah,
I had one a few months ago.
Did you?
And it's on one of my publicity shots actually, but
nice.
It's just curly, and it's like it's a Bluto beard. What I wanted was one of those epic sort of Viking, or Kratos from God of War, or one of those just to look just to make it look like I've got a chin. But it's Bluto, so it just had to go.
They lied to us. Like every like author photo that I saw as a kid, was of course of a dude, because I was just reading 19 or like Victorian, or mustaches, and my mustache is also awful. Yeah, I thought it came with a biz, but apparently not. So
no, well, that's the
heck
problem.
So, what about you? What about you? Like, what's your biggest sort of like you thought it was going to be one thing and it wasn't? It's something else.
Well, apart from the money, it was probably. I don't know. I went into it kind of expectation free. I just it was what I'd always wanted to do. I didn't realize how hard it was. To get good, I guess. What's learning the craft is hugely difficult. But I don't remember having any particular expectations where I thought, oh, it's really not like that. It is really just sitting in a room in front of a keyboard, smashing on it with your big fat sausage fingers until words come out. That's basically that's the job.
Right. Either like comports to your personality or it doesn't. And I'm always in awe of people who seem to be just as good at writing as they are at social media and self-promotion and just being charming and like suave. Like what school did you go to? Like what finishing school? Like how did you get this? This is
you would think it would be something that would suit sort of social pariahs or people that don't like not people. But it's surprising the number of people that actually do this really well and then go on to do all the publicity really well as well. It's infuriating, actually. So maybe we should move on to some audience questions. Should we do that?
We have audience questions? Yeah, sure.
I think we do. Shall I read? I've clicked the thing. Shall
Okay,
I read the first? Should I read the first one out?
Read it away. Yes.
The first one's from Dave Walters. How do your emotions differ or compare when it comes to finishing a series versus beginning a new one?
Well, so which do you prefer? Do you feel like you have like more positive emotions at the outset or at the sunset?
I think I'm always. It's at the end. It's definitely because it's just I find the whole process quite difficult.
Right.
I enjoy. The bit of each book I enjoy at the end when you've edited it and you're reading it again and it's a little bit like somebody else has written it and it's like, oh, this is quite good. Whereas at the beginning of the process, it's basically like pulling teeth for a lot of the time, and it's a hugely difficult process. So I definitely prefer the end.
So the first 100 pages, last 100 pages, which would you rather write?
Ooh. That's a good one, actually. I don't know, because when you're writing the first 100 pages, it's all like, yes, this is I'm building this, and it's great, and it's awesome. And then obviously you've got the swollen middle, which is sort of like crawling through treacle and brambles and tacks, and and then you get to the last 100 pages, and it's like, right, I'm nearly there, and you start to sort of gallop to the finish. And they're very different emotions, but it's still, you're still in quite a positive state as opposed to the middle chunk.
I think we can all agree the middle is the worst.
Yeah, definitely. What about you? You happier at the beginning or the end?
I'm absolutely like a beginning guy, because that's where you make all the messes for the future stuff to fix. You're like, oh yeah, there's this like little mystery here. Well, the future me will figure out. So you're just making messes, and it's fun. It's like popping the New Year's Day poppers. It's lots of confetti and toys flying around, and then in the cold light of morning you have to sweep it up. And so the last 100 pages, the first 100 pages will take me half the time to write as the last 100 pages, I think.
Right. It's interesting what you say about future you will fix it. There is, every writer has that. You've got a writing you and an editing you, and it's for me it's like an abusive relationship. It's like writing me is like, oh, it's okay. Editing me, editing me will fix this later, and then later on editing me is like, why have you done this to me? Why?
I sympathize. All right.
Yeah.
Did we answer that question? I don't know. What's that? I
don't, yeah. Sorry, David Walters, if we didn't answer that question adequately. Let's have another one.
Okay.
For Josiah. So
I could open up a chat. No, I'm just so anxious to see the chat.
I'll read it. I'll read it. Shall I read it?
Do you mind? I'm trying.
I don't mind. I don't mind at all.
Okay.
Reading some of Valletta's parts, I got a feeling she might be aromantic and or asexual. Is her lack of interest in romantic endeavors stemming from this, or am I reading too much into it? That's from Daniel.
I never tell readers how to interpret the characters. As I conceived of Valletta, one of the things I wanted to do from the outset was to have her be asexual. Like, that was just, from the first time you see her to the last time you see her, she has, I think that is part of her identity. And it's addressed as close as I get to explicitly in the final book. And yeah, so if that's an interpretation that readers take away, I'm glad, because that was my hope. But I mean, do you like feel the sort of sense of, I have made these characters as I best could conceive them, but then it is up to the readers ultimately to interpret them and kind of like want them to do so.
Yeah. I mean, there's only so much you can express on a page about a character. There's only so much backstory you can give the reader. So a lot of times they're going to have to fill in the gaps, and they might fill in the gaps in ways that you didn't think that, but that's fine. So, yeah.
But it's not always like your preference. I have had people take like quotes from my villains and take them out of context. Like, this was clearly a villain saying a villainous thing, but like, look at this great advice that Bancroft gave. Babies are delicious. You just have to have salt and pepper. And then I'm like, oh no, that was the baddie. You're not supposed to. That's just part of it, I guess. But no, yeah. But for Valletta, I'm glad that people are picking up on that, because that's something I definitely did into. So I have to figure out how to like look at questions. Okay, I need to like figure this out. So I think we answered that one. Which of your own characters would you want to go to a bar with? This is a good one. And which of the characters from the other's book would, in your opinion, be the best company for an evening over for a glass of beer? Since we haven't actually finished each other's books, we'll just focus on the first part of this. So, yes, which of your character would you want to go grab a beer with?
From the most recent one, it's going to have to be Connell Hawkesbury, because he's the only one who really liked a beer, to be honest. Rosamund, his mother, likes a glass of wine, but she's a bit prim. So I think if you're gonna go out and have a good time, it's gonna be Connell Hawkesbury, who most people won't know who that is because the book's not released till January. But
give us a taste of his character.
Know what I'm talking about. Sorry.
I mean, so what's he like? Give us a taste of his character.
He's the eldest son of Guildmaster Rosamund Hawkesbury, and he's basically when the book starts, he's being sent off to do his military training. On the outside, he's the perfect guild heir, the perfect son. He's tall, he's handsome, he's intelligent-ish, and then once he's sort of out from under his mother's skirts, the real him kind of comes to the fore, and he's not quite as perfect as he's been portraying.
Oh, that sounds fun. Yeah, a good person to get a beer with. Make sure that he buys every other round, otherwise probably not gonna.
That does come up in the book. What about you? Which one of your characters would you like to go out for?
Probably. That's a good question. I should come up with. Probably Byron, because he doesn't drink, and so he could be the designated driver. But I think he would be merciless with his tear downs of both my personality, my affect, and my behavior. So I think he's got a very sharp tongue, and I find that to be amusing. When you go out for a night on the town, you want some good laugh, some good crack.
Absolutely,
he would be that guy.
Someone needs to be the clown.
Yeah.
Definitely. Right.
All right.
Next one for both. What is your? I think I was going to ask this anyway. What is your plotting process? Do you tend to create detailed outlines before starting a project, or do you sort of jump around, let things more gradually come together? I think that's the plotter pantser question in a nutshell. So
so you want to go first?
No, I'd like you to go first.
I think it's your turn. Man, I hate this question because it requires me to be either like frank and honest or like duplicitous and say things like, "Oh, well, I guess I'm sort of a plotter." Sometimes I pants myself. I do feel like I am a gadget garbage person in the sense that I do a little bit of everything, and I pivot a lot to find the new process that works. And so sometimes I will write outlines, and then I will forget them. I will just sort of draft entire scenes and scenelets, and I'll write in characters' voices to get a grip on them, and I'll delete it or never look at it again. So it's most of the best writing that I do, and this sounds like a little bit romantic in a way that it certainly is not, is in the middle of the night. Like, I'm the kind of guy who wakes up and has like his little pad or his phone or whatever, and I just bang out the scene or the exchange between two characters, or a turn in the plot at 2 a.m, and then I look at the next day, and about half the time it's like, oh, that is why I should take sleeping pills, because there's no reason to wake up for that. That was a waste of my time. But sometimes, some of my favorite moments have just come from that sort of inspirational spasm. But I don't have a process. With this new book, I'm trying to do an outline, and I don't know if you ever do this. You write like this protracted, like full outline, and you get like a third of the way through, and you're like, I'm just gonna go off and do this other thing, and you have this vestigial outline left behind. So that's what I'm doing right now. But what about you? What's your process like?
Well, I think that the whole plotter pantser dichotomy, I think, is a little bit fallacious, because it's more of a spectrum. I think people do, as you've just explained, people do both. People do both in the same book. But like you, my process, it changes with every novel, sometimes 3 times when I'm writing a novel. But I do plot. I tried pantsing once and it didn't work, and I ended up having to rewrite a third of the novel. So, and that really not, because I don't like wasting words. and especially for the latest series, which is a huge multi-point of view epic fantasy. You need to know where everybody is and what everyone's doing, otherwise you're setting yourself up for a lot of rewrites on top of the rewrites that I did. So yeah, I plotted all that really quite meticulously in Excel with columns for different characters, sorting out everyone's arc. Yeah, so I have plotted that series quite meticulously.
I appreciate that confession, because with the last book, I also had an Excel spreadsheet that was color coded, because
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
The time, it was a lot of like just sort of the temporal stuff, like getting the timelines right. But yeah, boy, I kind of felt like that was the bottom. Like, as a creative person, like, all right, I guess it's time to open an Excel spreadsheet. Here we go.
Well, but there needs to be, you need to strike a balance, I think, between artistry and creativity and craft. Right. And I think, because what we do is an amalgamation of both of those things. You've got to be creative, but you've also got to know what you're doing, and you've got to learn what you're doing. And you can't just go off on a fit of whimsy and write anything you want, because then you could end up writing.
You can in the first 100 pages.
Yeah.
But that's it. That's why I love the first 100 pages. You're like, oh, look, here's a baker who's also a dragon. Oh, who knew? And, it's just so much fun.
To be fair, you can do. There's nothing you can do. You've just got to know the rules before you break them, I think. But for me, I need a plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have like a preferred method other than Excel? Like, are you kind of like a word processor kind of dude? Do you have like a whiteboard, and you do like your sort of projection of different words on there? What do you have?
Again, as I said, my process changes. So I've used the little cards before. I've used Scrivener. Scrivener's got a really good it's basically cards on the screen. I've used pad and paper. I've used Excel. I've used Word. I've used Google Docs. I've used everything, and it changes all the time.
So how do you not get my problem? And I do the same thing where I change all the time. So I get just very enamored with the new form. And so then I'm like, oh, I have a new pack of pens. These are different colored pens. And then I just spend all the time.
It's also looking for that magic pill. It's looking for the, maybe this time it'll be easy. And it's not. It's just not. I do this new thing. It'll make the process so much easier, and it just doesn't. It's just as hard as it was the first time, the third time, the sixth time.
I relate. It sounds very familiar. Awesome. So I asked this one. Oh, Evan Winter. Hey, Evan. Hey. Hello, Evan.
Hi, Evan.
Creating versus consuming can take strange directions. So do you find that you tell stories like the ones you love to read, or do you see your writing as something else? That's a very good question.
It is. Should I go?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, that's quite difficult to answer, because everyone's taste changes as you grow, as you develop, as you consume. So, I mean, I used to love, my sort of gateway drug into long form fantasy was the Dragonlance series. And I loved it. Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, loved it. And I can't imagine even reading that sort of stuff now, but the stuff I would have been writing 10, 15, 20 years ago would have been very similar to that. Whereas the stuff that I consume now, I guess you do reflect a lot of stuff in your writing, but influences come from everywhere. I think so. I'll admit I have tried to emulate my favorite authors in certain books, but it always ends up coming out in your own voice. Once you've developed your own voice, that you're always talking, your characters will always speak with your voice, or the voice you give them, rather than somebody else's. I've probably not answered that very well, but
no, I think I absolutely have. I mean, it's that comports with my own an experience where I have tried to write texts that are very much emulative. Especially with Sin and the Sins, I was reading a lot of sort of post-war European fiction at the time, and that shows up a lot. I mean, it's very explicit how it shows up, and it was just because I was trying to like learn how to write a book and figure out that process. Now I've definitely like tried to expand this sort of influences that I bring into the work. I'm trying to diversify my consumption of things. But I will say that when I'm working on a work of fiction, I tend to consume more history, nonfiction, poetry, other genres, because if I read 10 pages of a better writer than me, which is a lot of them, I just begin to do a weird sort of parroting thing. Like I'm that guy. Like if I hung out at a party with a person who had a particular accent for longer than 12 minutes, I will begin to speak in that accent in a horrible sort of like offensive way. And it's just this terrible flaw that I have for like empathy and wishing to fit in. And so I tend to parrot a lot. And so yeah, when I'm writing, I tend to read more things that are, historical, nonfiction, etc.
Yeah.
But it's been great the last few years to have smarter people than me expose me to grander vistas than what I began with. Because I really would just started like writing after I got my literature degree, and that was a pretty myopic canon I was originally working from. So yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting what you say about reading better writers. Because I find when I read better writers, it just makes me want to do something else. I should have got a job in that supermarket. I should have not even bothered doing this in the first place. Obviously, I'm not going to mention any names, but I've read some stuff quite recently. And I'm like, I'm never going to be able to be this good in a million years. And then you've just got to, slap yourself around the face and just get on with it again.
And that is tough. I mean, I find that pretty much every writer of fiction that I read, there's something admirable or amazing or accomplished about what they're doing. When I was back when I was teaching, one of the things I told my students repeatedly is it's easy to be dismissive. It's easy to be superior. It's easy to feel like you can condescend. It's hard to understand what the value of a thing is and to understand it enough to appreciate what has been accomplished. And so when I had students say like, well, that's the worst book ever written, I would be like, okay, now I have to come back and we have to talk about why it has value, because it's entertaining people. It's doing something. We, want to study the things we would like just to easily dismiss out of hand. Absolutely. Try to keep it diverse. Evan, that was a great question. Thank you so much.
There's always, going back to that, there's always a question about the subjectivity of things. I saw there's a book called The North Water, which is recently, I think the BBC turned it into a TV show with Colin Farrell, I think. And I looked on Goodreads, and it's sort of been, I guess, reviewed, but it's been panned as being sort of disgusting. And that was the one thing that made I thought, you know what, I'm gonna buy it and I'm gonna read it, and it's fantastic. So I think this, the subjectivity of things, when you're feeling a little bit down about the craft, and maybe that a lot of people are better than you, there's a niche for everyone.
And it's so hard. Like thinking about things is like better and worse. I think that that's what
it's not for you a lot of the time.
Yeah, or uncomfortable. And I think that entertainment doesn't have to always be uncomfortable. It doesn't have to it's not like, well, I saw that movie and I enjoyed myself too much and therefore I feel guilty, which was pretty much my cinematic experience in my 20s. We would go see like the most punishing film you could find, so it doesn't have to be that, but it is okay to feel a little seasick or uncertain or confused or caught off guard when you're reading something, even for entertainment. And then to make your own call about whether something is for you or not. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Howdy. Have either of you ever had a dream that you were inside your own published fictional world, or had a dream ever resulted in a finished released novel?
Ooh, that's a good
I'll
idea.
let you go.
I think it's your turn. I think I did the last one.
Is it my turn? I thought
Yeah,
last
I
time
think
we just talked our way around it. Okay. Yeah. Well, quick answer: no. I don't dream very vividly, and I very rarely remember any of them. Although I did remember the dream I had yesterday, where I was dreaming about bad reviews. So
yeah.
that one, so for some reason, stuck out in my head. So, but no, otherwise, no, I don't really. I'm not, because some people keep like dream diaries and stuff like that, which and come up with really wacky ideas from that, which and hugely imaginative stuff. But I just can't bring myself to do that.
Like I said, I think it's for me the nocturnal epiphany is embarrassingly frequent, and it does often come out of these sort of dreams. But there's no usually it's like a dream of I was in a shopping mall at the salad bar, and there was too much chocolate pudding, and then I'm like, oh, that's sort of interesting. Like, it's not like it's not you dream the scene. You have something that kind of inspires absurdly through whatever sort of suggestions you come up with a new thing. And so I'm very much inspired by dreams, but there's never been something that's been a one-to-one correlation. It's just sort of like you see something weird in a dream, and then you kind of like think about it the next day, like, that was weird. Like, why were there giant snails in the ceiling? Like, well, I guess it goes in the book. It's that sort of stuff, as opposed to plot points. I remember being a kid and reading about George Lucas, and he said, like, the entirety of the pantheon of Star Wars came to me in a single dream one evening. I was like, how? Like, I mean, I remember like seconds of dreams. I never like sit down and remember epics of dreams. So I find that ability impressive, but not one that I personally have.
And add to that the fact that you got most of the plot for Star Wars from a Kurosawa film, so it's
in a dream.
Yeah, you must have dreamt it. Yeah, of course you did, George.
Yeah, that was one of those like childhood like disillusionments that you have later. You're like, wait a minute, you're just like me. You're just a hack. I've got so much of like my material from 3 or 4 sources that I talk about all the time. Fritz Lang's Metropolis, Italo Calvino's Invisible Cities. Like whenever, or Douglas Adams, whenever someone says like, this seems familiar, I'm like, absolutely. I'm filtering through better, more original creators than myself.
Nothing's created in a vacuum. You can't, nothing, and there's nothing new. Nothing is ever really new.
Yeah,
as much as you might try and put a different spin on it, or put characters in original situations, or with the latest book, I've tried to sort of veer away from traditional European medieval fantasy, and add sort of other sort of steampunky elements to it, and try and make the cultures as unique as I could. But obviously, there'll still be things that have influenced it from real world, from literature, from history, all sorts of stuff. So you're never gonna be able to create something completely original.
It's the curse.
It's the curse.
But also, I mean, it's a continuum. That's what we want. I mean, I'm adding to the ongoing conversation creatively, and that's not a bad thing. So let's see. The next one. What led you to choose a Trilobite for design and book? Oh, that one just went away. Here's a new one. What has been one of your favorite responses or reviews for one of your books? And you answer. So, what do you think?
Favorite responses or reviews for one of my books. That's a tough one because I can't. I try not to read reviews. I'm going to say that now. Everyone says reviews aren't for authors. Sometimes we do look, but I try not to, because obviously
it's bad for your health.
We're also quite sensitive souls, so we don't like seeing people slamming things that we've done. I can't think of anything in particular. I'm gonna have to bow out of this question because there's nothing really that's ever stuck out
For me, it's not like the though I've always appreciated everyone who's written a review for my books, especially the positive ones. The personal notes I've gotten from people who have said this book meant something to me for this reason. It helped me with this difficult moment in life, or it helped me feel more normal, or you get these letters from readers which I find to be like I have a file. I keep them in when I'm having a bad day. I open up the file and I'll look at a couple of them because it means a lot. And so as much as I really appreciate the reviewers who helped promote the books, bring them to new readerships, I couldn't do what I do without them. I'm with you, Rich, in the sense that I try not to read them too much, too often, too closely. But if I get a letter or correspondence message from a reader who says like, "Hey, thanks, this helped," that is the most meaningful thing for me. And I have, yeah. So broadly, for everyone watching this, if you feel some significant thing for something you've read and you're like, "Oh, should I write the author and express to her or him then what I have felt about this?" The answer is yes. You should just take that 5-10 minutes, do it. It will make their week. They will absolutely appreciate it.
Absolutely. Okay, let's do the next one. I think this is for you.
Okay.
What led you to choose a Trilobite for a design on your book? They're a favorite of mine, and I was pleased to see them pop up.
I was. I've always been enamored of antiquity and archaeology and things buried in the dirt. When I was growing up, I felt like maybe I'll be a paleontologist. Maybe I'll be a person a geologist who understands the world and how it actually is. Unfortunately, I'm a little too dim. I don't have the facilities to do that. But I mean, since I was a kid, reading National Geographics, looking at these ancient creatures frozen in sandy stone, just been completely entranced. I mean, like we have aliens living or have lived on this planet, and it's incredible. As good as my imagination is, I can't compete with the wonders that we pull from the soil still. So yeah, it's just something I've always really loved. Not in a way that is. Please don't quiz me. I don't know the names of all the different, but I just love it. I mean, if someone gave me a table book that was like trilobites and other weird things that smushed to the bottom of the ocean, I'd be like, thank you. I will treasure this and look at it all the time.
You've had quite a portfolio career, though, I think, haven't you? Don't you like trying different things out and experiences and jobs and sort of. How do you think those different experiences have sort of informed what you do now, the sort of writing? Do you think that's been an advantage that you've got this kind of jack of all trades past
master of none? I think I'm sympathetic, and I think that if anyone takes anything with my work, is that like, boy, we need more people who are listeners and sympathizers and trying to understand as opposed to being understood. And one of the things about I moved around a lot, I've had a lot of different jobs, is you're always showing up and just trying to understand, and not be the smartest person in the room, never being an expert, but delighting in everyone's expertise. So when I go to a party, I like to find the person who is most passionate about something I know nothing about, and I'll sit there and listen to them talk about competitive kite fighting for an hour and a half or whatever it is, because I love people who have passion. I appreciate learning things I know nothing about, and yeah. So I think that's part of like having all those different jobs. I think if you think of yourself as the main character, you have a different experience of life. But if you think of yourself as like just a perennial student, somebody just trying to go around trying to like just get it a little bit and help others when you can, leave things a little bit better. That's sort of my MO, hopefully.
I think all the best writers tend to be sponges. You sort of you're soaking up your experience as you go through life, rather than as you've said, rather than being the main protagonist in your own journey, you're sort of observing and just soaking up atmospheres and even if it's a funny line someone says here or how someone acts there, you soak all that up and it sort of that will bleed into the page, if that's not too pretentious a thing to say. It will sort of it will end up on in a book somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's just that little bit, it adds to that little bit of honesty that sort of make things authentic even when you're writing fantasy.
I completely agree. Do we have more questions? Only like 10 minutes left. Let's see. For Richard, how is the new series different from your previous fantasy series?
Obviously it's brand new characters, brand new world. It has someone described it today actually in a review as ether punk, which I think is a little bit like steampunk but without the steam engines. I don't know what ether is. It's basically the main sort of setting, the main country where everything's set is run on a commodity called Firestone, which is basically a jewel which can be manipulated by certain mages and it powers machinery. So that element of it, that element of the world building is quite original. But it's all this series in particular is based around a family, which I haven't done before. It was all the Steelhaven series was sort of a little bit found family-ish. So there were orphans and people from different sort of disparate backgrounds all sort of coming together, whereas this sort of concentrates on a core family of four, a mother and her kids. So that's the main way it differs from my other books.
That's very interesting. That sounds very good though. I like those elements. That's awesome.
Thank you. For Josiah, how much of a role has reading/writing poetry played in writing prose?
The great thing about writing poetry is that you realize there's never the perfect word. There's just a less wrong word. And so you are neurotically bound to examine every single particle of every sentence for the rest of your life. I get really.
It leeches the enjoyment out of everything.
It does. It really does. I think about meter a lot. I think about when I was first writing Song of the Sense, it took 300 pages before I stopped thinking about orphan lines as I was writing them. I'd get to the end of a sentence, I'd be like, there's one word in the next line. I was like, that seems like an orphan. So we're going to have to just either delete some words up here. And so just things that would never actually appear on the printed page. Because of course we all know the Word document doesn't translate into the print document.
It'll be typeset completely different. So it doesn't matter,
exactly. Yeah. So it was just a needless obsessiveness. And so now I would describe poetry as needless obsessiveness. And because I'm not good at writing poetry, I'm a little bit better at writing prose. But what it did teach me to be conscientious about word choice, thoughtful about how a line stands or reads. I do spend most of my day muttering aloud. I don't know if you're the same way, Rich. That you compulsively maybe read things you've written. Do you ever do that? Nope. Yes.
No, I don't. I only at the editing stage. Obviously, that there is an editing part of the editing process where you've just got to not even try and understand the greater sort of sense of what's going on. You just got to. Does this sentence make sense? Is it lyrical? Does it work within the context of the paragraph? That kind of thing. What parts of your book I have read? Every chapter has a little sort of bit of verse or an epithet or something like that at the beginning of it. Did you do those as you were going on, or did you do them right at the end? All right, this chapter needs something.
It was as I was going on mostly, and sometimes I would put something there as a placeholder that I knew was not very good, and I would go back, whenever I thought of the midnight epiphany of oh, that could be clever, and I would go back and replace it. But that was just in many ways for me, and I'm glad that some readers have enjoyed those things, because I did have a lot of. That's definitely be the the vestige of the poetry spirit in me kind of peeking through.
That's what
I did try to kill it.
They all seem to be sort of very pithy and witty. And I just wonder how long you spent doing those compared to the rest of the chapter.
Too long.
But it works.
There's a reason it took me 10 years to do this stupid series. I was sitting there going, like, there's a better way to say this, like 2 sentences that half the readers will skip. Because even as a young reader, like when I came to like the header of a paragraph or the header of a chapter, I was like, if that was important, it would be in the chapter, and I would just skip it. And so it's ornament, and it's for me, in all offense for me.
But it gives your books a lot of quotable lines. Like
yes,
as I mentioned off camera earlier, your writing sort of reminded me of Mark Lawrence, and Mark Lawrence has got so many quotable lines in his books.
Absolutely.
And it's I like that element of it. It's something I wish I could do, which I don't.
Well, the secret is to spend 10 years writing bad poetry. So you still got time. Jump on board.
I have still got time. I have, maybe. Have I got 10 years? Sometimes I wonder. I wonder. Right, okay, we've got one last question.
Okay.
What are some of your favorite fantasy stories you've watched or read recently? Books, TV, film, video games, etc. I'll let you go first.
So I don't have a lot of time to read books right now. That's just the honest truth. And I don't watch a lot of TV because I'm usually either working or sleeping or playing with a toddler. But the series that I'm most I think invested right now is Fonda Lee's. Her Jade City was one of my favorite books that I'd read, and I think it was 2017 when it came out. Jade War, wonderful. Jade Legacy is coming out in a couple of weeks. Fonda Lee has a way of doing things with both characters and generations and politics and magic, and a way that's really exciting and new. So I encourage everyone who has not started to read the Jade books to go read Jade City right now by Fonda Lee, and you'll be just in time to read the conclusion in a couple of weeks. It's not too far away. What about you, Rich?
Reading wise, I've been reading Joe Abercrombie's latest trilogy, which I've been enjoying a lot. On TV, I've just finished watching Squid Game on TV, which I really enjoyed. I think
I'm 4 episodes in, so don't ruin it for me.
No spoilers.
I'm going real slow.
Slow. But for me, some of the best sort of film and TV anywhere is coming out of Korea right now. I'm loving all sorts of Korean cinema, Parasite and stuff like that, Handmade, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Loving it.
Yeah, Parasite was a revelation, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm also a bit of a computer game geek. So I recently played a game that's been out for about 6 years because I'm always behind the curve on that, and it's called The Order 1886, and it's sort of a steampunk. But it's set in 1886, obviously, hence the name. But it's sort of it's steampunky horror sort of thing. And the game's okay, but the world building and the script and the voice acting is awesome. So I'd recommend that as well. So yeah, those are the 3 things that I've been very impressed with recently.
That's great. Yeah, awesome. So I think that's all the questions we're about at an hour. We've done it.
I think we are. I think we're at 59 minutes.
Wow, we did a pretty good job.
We've done all right there. I think we've managed to.
So.
Well done us. Yeah. I hope the listener appreciates.
Oh yeah, boy. Well, Rich, I'm really appreciative that you took this time to talk to me. I'm really excited about your launch. I know that everyone is looking forward to reading this. It's January what?
January the 18th, I believe.
Awesome.
In all good bookshops, in ebook and audiobook as well, if that's what you're into. I think I can Amazing. Also say the audio, but they're doing something quite special. I'm not know if I'm allowed to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. They're doing something quite special with the audiobook, and because each of the chapters is from a different character's point of view, so they're getting a different voice actor to do each. They're
That's
basically casting the book,
incredible.
which I'm really excited about because that's never happened to me before. So yeah. So
Congratulations,
if you like
that's
audiobooks,
amazing.
I think you'll like that. And congratulations to you on book 4 in the series, the 4th and final book. I'm sure it's going to do really well.
Hope so. Yeah. So yeah, we'll do this again with your follow up to this, maybe. You know, when my next book comes out and your follow up comes out, we'll get back together and wag our chins.
Yes, we will definitely. I'm up for that. If I've
good.
calmed down enough from this time, let's do it.
And the power stayed on, so hooray!
It did. It did. The power did stay on, which I'm very, very pleased about.
All right. Well, thanks again, and thank you, Angela, for hosting and putting this together. And Orbit, everyone there, thank you so much. Thank you for everybody's questions. Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you soon.